Welcome to Le Podcast de Philippe. We're going deep today on something pretty exciting in the world of recycling, plastic recycling, to be more specific.
Yeah, this is a big one.
It is a big one. We're talking about KUBU-M12, and I know that probably sounds like something out of Star Wars.
It does have a sort of sci-fi ring to it.
It does, but it's actually a biocatalyst, and it's got the potential to really change how we deal with all that plastic piling up.
It really could. I mean, the fact that this thing can break down over 90% of peat plastic in a matter of hours is just incredible.
Hours.
Yeah, hours, not days, not weeks, like some of the methods we use now.
Which is such a contrast to what we're dealing with now. In the U.S., for example,
Right.
only like 5% of plastic waste actually gets recycled.
A dismal statistic.
It really is. So before we get too far ahead of ourselves, let's back up a little bit. Can we talk about what makes this KUBU-M12 so special?
Sure.
I think for starters, we should probably explain what PET plastic is and why it's such a problem.
Okay, so PT stands for polyethylene terephthalate. Yeah, it rolls right off the tongue, but really it's just a type of plastic we use for almost everything. Water bottles, food containers, clothing packaging, you name it. And the problem with PD is that it's incredibly durable.
Which you would think would be a good thing.
You'd think so, right? But the downside of that durability is that it doesn't break down easily in the environment, so it ends up in landfills and oceans where it can stick around for hundreds of years.
Yeah. And we all know what that does to ecosystems and marine life.
Right, it's a serious threat.
And then you add to that the fact that our current recycling methods for PD are
Not great.
not great at all. They're slow and efficient,
And they can't really handle contaminated plastics.
which I'm guessing is a lot of it.
A lot of it, yeah.
So how does KUBU-M12 address these issues? I mean, what makes it so much faster and efficient?
It's like this, you know how a key unlocks a door? Well, KBUM12 is like a specialized key that unlocks and speeds up the breakdown of PD plastic.
Okay, I kind of get that.
It works on a molecular level, breaking down the plastic chains into smaller, reusable components.
So it's not just breaking it up into smaller bits, it's actually breaking down the chemical bonds holding the plastic together.
Exactly.
That's pretty amazing. And the fact that it can handle contaminated plastic is a huge plus.
Huge. It opens up possibilities for recycling plastic that we previously couldn't even touch.
So we could potentially recycle way more plastic than we do now.
Exactly. And there's another thing that's really remarkable about KUBU-M12. The amount you need to break down plastic is tiny.
Really? How tiny are we talking?
Research shows that a mere 0.58 grams can process a significant quantity of PET.
You're kidding.
Nope. A tiny amount for a huge impact.
That is incredible. Talk about efficiency.
Yeah.
This has got to have major implications for cost effectiveness, right? I mean, if you can break down so much plastic with such a small amount of this biocatalyst, it seems like it could make recycling way more affordable on a large scale.
That's the hope.
And that's what we're going to dig into next, so stay tuned.
That's exactly what has people so excited about KBU-M12.
Yeah, I mean, if this really takes off, it could completely change the economics of the whole recycling industry.
It very well could, and make recycling much more competitive with producing virgin plastic.
Which would be amazing, but it also makes me wonder, if KUBU-M12 is really this efficient and potentially cheaper than traditional methods, what happens to all the jobs that rely on the current recycling infrastructure?
That's a good question, and it's definitely something to think about. There's a chance that some jobs in the traditional recycling sector could be lost.
Right.
But at the same time, the rise of KUBU-M12 would also create new opportunities and industries.
Oh, yeah, like what?
Well, think about it. You'd need specialized facilities and labs to produce and refine the biocatalyst, and then there's the whole logistics side of things, distribution networks to transport and supply KUBU-M12 to recycling plants all over the world.
So it's not necessarily a complete elimination of jobs, but more like a shift in the types of jobs that are in demand.
Oh. Exactly. Instead of manual sorting and processing, we might see a greater need for skilled technicians and scientists specializing in biocatalyst production and application.
Interesting. So it's almost like the recycling industry is going through its own kind of technological evolution.
I think that's a great way to put it.
Sort of like what we've seen in manufacturing and agriculture.
Exactly. And this evolution could have ripple effects beyond just the recycling industry itself.
Like, what do you mean?
Well, think about waste management companies, especially the ones dealing with overflowing landfills.
Yeah.
KBU-M12 could be a game changer for them.
Yeah, it could potentially solve a huge environmental problem and maybe even turn plastic waste into a profit.
Right. It's a classic turning trash into treasure scenario.
And speaking of treasure, I'm sure investors are all over this, especially the ones focused on ESG, environmental, social, and governance factors.
Oh, absolutely. KBU-M12 is like a dream come true for ESG-focused portfolios. It aligns perfectly with sustainability goals and has the potential to generate some serious financial returns.
So everyone wins, basically.
Yeah. It's looking that way.
But let's zoom out for a second and talk about the bigger picture. What does the emergence of KUBU-M12 mean for the future of plastic itself?
That's the big question, isn't it? Could this technology finally help us move away from the whole take, make, dispose model of plastic consumption?
And embrace a circular economy where plastic is constantly being recycled and reused.
Exactly. And KBU-M12 might just be the catalyst that makes that transformation happen.
It's an exciting thought. Imagine a world where plastic water bottles don't end up in landfills or the ocean, but are broken down and turned into new bottles.
It would be a total paradigm shift in how we view and use plastic.
And that shift could have huge implications not just for the environment, but also for how we design and manufacture products.
Absolutely, companies might start designing products specifically for easy and efficient recycling using KDU-M12.
So we might see a wave of innovation in plastic materials and product design.
Precisely, with a focus on creating products that can be easily broken down and reused multiple times.
That's really interesting. So instead of just focusing on reducing plastic consumption, we could also be focusing on creating better, more recyclable plastics.
It's about finding a balance between reducing our reliance on plastic and making sure that the plastic we do use can be responsibly managed and reused.
And that brings us to another really important point, the impact of KUBU-M12 on microplastics.
Ah, yes, the tiny plastic particles that are polluting our oceans and food chains.
They're a huge concern, and we're only just starting to understand the long-term effects they could have on human health and ecosystems.
It's a silent threat that often gets overshadowed by the larger issue of plastic pollution.
But KUBU-M12 could potentially offer a solution.
That's the hope. By breaking down PE plastic at a molecular level, it could help reduce the amount of plastic that breaks down into those harmful microplastics.
So it's like KUBU-M12 is addressing both the visible and invisible aspects of the plastic problem.
Exactly. It's tackling the plastic waste we can see like bottles and bags, while also potentially mitigating the threat of these invisible microplastics.
It's a multifaceted solution to a very complex problem. But we also have to remember that KUBU-M12 isn't a magic bullet.
You're right, it's not going to solve the plastic crisis overnight. We still need to address the root causes of the problem, things like overconsumption, poor waste management, and a lack of awareness about the environmental impact of our choices.
So technology alone isn't the answer.
Exactly. We need a combination of innovative solutions like KUBU-M12, responsible consumer choices, and effective policy changes to really make a dent in the global plastic pollution crisis.
Yeah. It's a systemic issue that requires a systemic response.
Absolutely. But technologies like KBU-M12 give us reason to believe that we can turn things around and create a more sustainable future.
It's inspiring to see how scientific innovation can give us hope for a better future. But let's get back to the practical side of things. How do we make sure that KBU-M12 actually reaches its full potential?
That's the million-dollar question, and I think the answer lies in collaboration.
Collaboration between who?
Between everyone, scientists, entrepreneurs, policymakers, investors, we all need to work together to create the conditions for KUBU-M12 to succeed.
So we need to build the infrastructure, develop the supply chains, and create a real market demand for this technology.
Exactly. It's like a relay race. The scientists have handed off the baton with this amazing discovery, and now it's up to the rest of us to carry it forward and make sure it reaches the finish line.
And speaking of the finish line, let's talk about the potential economic impact of KUBU-M12, who are the major players in this emerging market, and how might they shape the future of this technology?
That's an excellent point. Let's dive into the economics of KUBU-M12 in our next segment.
All right, so we're back and ready to unpack the economics of this KUBU-M12 thing.
Let's do it.
I think it's safe to say that the impact is going to be felt across a bunch of different industries.
Absolutely. We're talking potential ripple effects across entire supply chains.
Yeah. And when we look at who stands to benefit the most from all of this, the recycling industry immediately comes to mind, right?
Oh, for sure. They're on the front lines of this whole thing.
I mean, companies that are already processing PET plastic, they have to be paying close attention to how this technology develops.
Of course, it's a potential game changer for their business.
Right, because KUBU-M12 could really up their efficiency and maybe even bring down their costs.
It could absolutely. I mean, if you can break down plastic, faster handle contaminated materials, and maybe even use less energy in the process, that's a win-win-win.
Talk about a competitive edge, but what about waste management companies? How would KUB-M12 change things for them?
Waste management companies, especially the ones struggling with those massive landfills, they could see some huge benefits.
Yeah, imagine if they could significantly reduce the amount of plastic going into landfills.
That's the dream, isn't it?
It would be a win for the environment and potentially a big win financially, too.
Turning trash into treasure, they call it.
Exactly. And speaking of treasure, let's talk about the investors. Who do you think is most likely to jump on the KUB-M12 train?
Well, ESG investors are probably the most excited about this. They're all about sustainability, and KUBU-12 fits right into that.
Yeah, it's like a perfect storm for them, aligning with their values and potentially offering a great return on investment.
Exactly. It's not often you find an opportunity that's good for the planet and good for the bottom line.
But let's not forget about the companies that actually produce the plastic products in the first place. How might they be affected by KUBU-M12?
That's where things get really fascinating. I think imagine a future where plastic manufacturers could actually integrate KUBU-M12 into their own production processes.
Whoa, you mean they could recycle their own plastic waste?
Exactly. Create a closed-loop system where they're not just relying on virgin plastic, but actually reusing their own materials.
That's brilliant. It would reduce their reliance on new materials and probably cut down on production costs, too.
And it's a great way to appeal to consumers who are increasingly demanding sustainable practices.
It's all about taking responsibility for the entire life cycle of a product, from creation to disposal and then back again.
A truly circular economy, and KUBU-M12 could be the key to making that happen.
So we could potentially see a whole new wave of innovation in plastic materials and product design.
Absolutely. Companies would be incentivized to design products that are optimized for recycling with KUM12.
So we're not just talking about recycling existing plastics, we're talking about designing new plastics with recyclability in mind from the get-go.
That's the future we're hoping for.
A future where plastic isn't seen as just a disposable waste product, but as a valuable resource that can be reused over and over again.
KUBU-M12 could really help us reshape our entire relationship with plastic.
It's amazing to think about the possibilities, and it all starts with this one groundbreaking discovery.
It's a testament to the power of science and innovation.
And a reminder that even when faced with huge challenges like plastic pollution, there's always hope for a brighter future.
Absolutely, we have to keep pushing for solutions, and KUBU-M12 is a powerful example of what's possible.
So there you have it, folks. A deep dive into the world of KUBU-M12 and its potential to revolutionize plastic recycling.
It's a story of science, economics, and environmentalism all intersecting.
A story that gives us hope for a more sustainable future. A future where maybe plastic pollution is a thing of the past.
A future we can all work towards.
A huge thanks to our expert for shedding light on this incredible technology, and to you, our listeners, for joining us on this journey. Don't forget to subscribe to Le Podcast de Philippe on YouTube and like the video. We'll be back soon with more deep dives into the world's most fascinating topics. Until then, stay curious.